So imagine this scenario. You're given the opportunity to put together a team to work on a high stakes project. So you gather what you consider and what many would consider to be a team of superstars. But then somehow that project fails, that team fails. Why would that happen? Well, if you listen to Mark Murphy, he would tell you that you're probably missing at least one of 5 critical roles that are required for a winning team. That is the topic of his most recent book, and we hear from this New York Times bestselling author after this. Hi, I'm Karin Reed. I'm a 4-time author, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, and communication expert on helping people to own the room, whether it be a physical one or a virtual one. Welcome to Speaker Dynamics. Mark Murphy, I am delighted to have you here today. So let's talk a little bit about your book that you just came out with called Team Players, the 5 Critical Roles You Need to Build a Winning Team. But before we get into what those roles are, I just wanted to find out, what gap did you see in how we currently think about teamwork? What inspired you to write this book?
So the thing that inspired me to write this was looking at people who said, basically, listen, this team, I hate being on teams. This is a waste of my time. This could have been an email. I am so much more productive when I'm working by myself. And, in theory, we should be, if you throw a bunch of people into a room, we should be a whole greater than the sum of its parts, right? I mean, that's synergy. Right. And at the time, I'm like, I don't know what the opposite of synergy is, but that's pretty much what we have. You throw 8 people into a room and somehow we get dumber than if we're not greater than the sum of our parts. We're not even equal to the sum of our parts. We are less than the sum of our parts. And that frustration was what started this. And many, many years ago, in the late 90s, when Michael Jordan was at his peak, he's walking off the court one day. And Tex Winters, the guy who created the triangle offense, he was assistant coach with the Chicago Bulls. He says to Michael, "Hey, Michael, there's no I in team." And Jordan looks back at him and goes, "Yeah, but there is in win." And that is the sentiment that really prompted this book. Like, how is it that we take amazingly smart people, stick them in a room, and somehow we get dumber than if we were, all firing on all cylinders as a group? And that was the impetus for it.
That's so interesting. And I do have some PTSD from group projects in high school and in college, where I definitely had that feeling where we're definitely not, equal to or greater than, the sum of our parts. So, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. But you've said that this book redefines what makes a team succeed. So how is your approach different from traditional ideas around psychological safety, for example, or just simply having trust amongst teammates?
So the big difference, if you look at teams in pretty much every other area of life, take a jazz band, a rock group, your favorite NFL team, NBA, a fire rescue crew, whatever. Every great group of people, a surgical team, a flight crew, doesn't matter. They are predicated on the idea of a differentiation of parts, of every person has a unique and distinct role to play. And yet, when we go into the business world, the number one North Star of teams is get everybody cohesive, get everybody together. It's like, let's smooth off the rough edges. Team player, the phrase often means just go along to get along. Be nice, be agreeable, don't be your distinct self, and certainly don't have distinct roles. We want homogeneity, right? We want we talk about having a cohesive team, but in every other dimension of life, teams have distinct roles. And so that's what kind of prompted, when we did the initial study, we asked people, okay, let's look at the best team you're on and let's look at the worst team you're on. And when we looked at their best teams, what we discovered was that they were pretty good at having distinct parts. So, we'd ask people like, okay, well, what does a team actually need to do? Like, what do you have to have a good team? Well, you have to be able to make decisions. You have to be able to smooth over conflict. You need somebody on the team to like roll up their sleeves and do some work. You need to keep yourself on track, right? Like hit to-dos and milestones and all that. And then typically, every so often at least, you need some fresh thinking, some out-of-the-box ideas. And when we looked at great teams, what we discovered was not only did they do all of those things well, they could make decisions. They didn't miss deadlines. They actually got work produced. They didn't have toxic levels of conflict. They had fresh ideas and creative thinking. Not only did they have all of that, but they typically had a person playing each of those roles. They had somebody on the team who could basically say to the group, listen, we've debated this for 2 hours now. Enough is enough. We're calling it. We're going to move on. Make a decision. They had somebody on the team who was like, wait, we're not leaving the meeting until we actually are clear on who's doing what by when. They had somebody on the team that when somebody else was like, scowling and doing that, somebody who had enough emotional IQ to reach out and go, hey, Pat, I noticed you're not really feeling it. Talk to us a little bit. Somebody who had that emotional IQ to kind of bring them out. They had somebody who'd be like, listen, we've been kind of in a rut here. What if we do this? I got a crazy idea. Now, bear with me. They had people that could do each of those things, whereas the worst teams were pretty imbalanced. And so either they were missing roles, like they didn't have that innovative thinker. They didn't have the task-focused person. They didn't have somebody who could make a decision, or they were heavily stacked all in one. Like we've all been in those meetings where you get 5 people who all think they should be making the decision. And so the entire meeting is just like we'll say it nicely, an ego contest between, who's going to win, or it's filled with so much harmony that nobody is willing to call another person out. Like when we royally screwed up, what is often called terminal niceness or toxic positivity. And so the worst teams were missing roles or were overloaded in one of them. And the best teams had a pretty even distribution. And at a minimum, they had all of the roles covered. And basically the idea is that you would never have a jazz band with 10 trumpeters and no drums. You wouldn't have an NFL team with 11 quarterbacks and no offensive line. That's
right. They have 5 point guards on the court. That's not going to work.
Exactly. It's just madness. And yet, when we go into a typical workplace team, that is what we're trying to build. And that's basically saying, I think we're on the wrong path here.
Well, let's not keep our listeners in suspense any longer, Mark. Let's talk about what those 5 critical roles are. And if you can do a kind of in a snapshot, because I know you can go deep on all of them. And as I was reading it, it was interesting. I was identifying people on my team who fit into the bucket. So, as you read the book, folks, there will be opportunities for self-reflection, and you can certainly put yourself, in the shoes of the person who's talking to you and like, oh, that is this role and this person plays this role. It's really helpful. But let's talk about the roles. So if you could go through them, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So the director is your decision maker. This is the person who they don't have to make every decision, but they are the ones who will make the decisions that others are afraid to make. The stabilizer is basically your taskmaster. They're the person that they provide the structure. They keep the to-dos, the deadlines. They make sure that we don't miss, what we're supposed to be doing. The achiever is the roll up their sleeves and get stuff done person. This is the person who says, I don't need to be in charge. Just tell me what to do and I will go do it and it'll be excellent. But please don't make me sit here for the next 3 hours, talking about my feelings and do a trust fall. Just give me an assignment. The harmonizer is that EQ person. They're the kind of the diplomat. They're the one that can smooth over the ruffled feathers. And then you've got your trailblazer, and they're the person that comes in with those out of the box ideas and says, listen, we're kind of getting stagnant here. We've been doing the same thing for 6 months now. we got to shake this up a little bit. Even if it's going to ruffle some feathers, the harmonizer will smooth them back over again. But the trailblazer will come in and shake it up and get those out of the box ideas.
Does everybody play one role, or can people have multiple roles on a team, and can they change, given a situation or over time?
Yeah. So one of the neat things, and one of the ways this is quite a bit different than when we think about typical personality assessments or pseudo personality assessments, is that people can play different roles. And in fact, a couple of points on this. Number one is that ultimately, to be a fully formed leader, you have to have some minimum viable competence in all five. Now, everybody is going to have their strength. We're all going to have, there are roles I don't love to play. But if you pushed me, if somebody was out sick for a day or two, yeah, I can get by playing the stabilizer. Is it my favorite? No, but I can appreciate what they bring and what they do. And so I have the minimum level of competence to be able to understand their importance. But that's one. But number two is that you may step into a group and look around and go, there's nobody on this group today, than this team that we just, assembled here, or this meeting. There's nobody that can make a decision. I guess I'm going to have to step in and play the trailblazer or the director. Or, we've been stuck in a rut, and I am hearing people talk about the same thing over and over again. Even though I'm not a natural trailblazer, I may have to do that today. Or even if I'm not a natural harmonizer, I may have to step in and play a role. And, for really small teams or startups, for example, yeah, you will often have to play. It's not unusual to find you start your own business, for example, there where you are playing director and trailblazer. You're doing both. You're coming up with the out of box ideas, but then because that's probably why you started the company in the first place, you had some great idea and okay, but now you're also, the chief decider. And right. So, and you probably don't have so many people at that point where the harmonizer role is that big of an issue. But, I think about Google's early days when they were only at, 90 million in revenue.
Only 90 million, right?
I know, right? And so Larry Page and Sergey Brin found the company, brilliant computer scientists, create this amazing search algorithm. And yet, their genius brought it to 90 million but it was haphazard. It was a chaotic mess. And they looked at their team and said, we are desperately missing a stabilizer. We have no order, no structure. And when we're not all that well suited to play that role, so we got to go get somebody. And so they hired a guy named Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt is the one that took them from 90 million to about 26 billion. And he describes himself as the adult supervision. He literally, when he talks about his role at Google, he basically said, I brought planning. I brought structure. I brought discipline. He said, listen, it was like a college grad seminar where we got these geniuses, but it was a chaotic mess. And all I brought was the structure. But that structure was, the missing piece from 90 million to 26 billion. Right. But that's the thing, is that each of these roles is critical. They're absolutely important. And it's good to be able to jump into roles, but there will come a point too where, because we all have natural strengths, we may look and say, we are in desperate need of a stabilizer or a harmonizer or a director, and that's just not me. Yeah. So I got to find somebody.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely needing the stabilizer whenever I'm like, okay, there are too many things on my plate and I'm not, or I have too many plates spinning and I can't keep them all spinning. I need somebody to provide that structure for me. So I feel that very deeply. So, finding your Eric Schmidt is an amazing thing. But let's put this within the context of communication, because this podcast is all about leadership communication. So, you talked about how, teams break down. Not because people stop talking, and I love how you say this, but because the wrong voices dominate. The wrong voices dominate. So what do you mean by that? And how do you make sure that all five roles have, equal time, equal airtime, and their voices are heard as much as everybody else in the room?
So a couple things that happen. Number one is that whoever is the de facto leader of the team often prioritizes the voices they like the most. And that may not be the voice that they need. So, for example, in your case, the person you needed was that stabilizer. By the way, I find this is true of a lot of founders, because for me as well, in the acknowledgments, I actually named my stabilizer because she is absolutely vital to me.
And sometimes you don't want to hear the stabilizer because they're like, you need to do it this way. I'm like, I don't want to think about that.
And that is exactly it, is that there are days where, we will sometimes have to schedule a call and I'll be like, listen, Jill, you got to give me I need half an hour to prep for this because this is going to suck. This is going to hurt and be painful. And I need to get in the right headspace so I can go through it. But what often happens is we prioritize the people that are easier to hear, but they're not always the ones that are most necessary for us to hear. So that's one. The second thing is that without roles in a group, oftentimes the group lacks structure. So, for example, people will talk about, we got to have trust, we got to have psychological safety, and this is a safe space where you can share those ideas, even if they're a bit controversial or run afoul of what were the rest of the consensus here and all of that. The problem is that on an unconscious level, often what happens is we hear somebody who raises an issue that we don't fully agree with. And if you watch any number of meetings, what you will see is people start to do stuff like,
yeah. And what he's doing, for those who are listening, he's folding his arms and sitting back.
and rubbing my forehead and scowling a little bit. And I may even make that noise. And that's one of the issues is we start to send sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle signals that I don't want to hear this perspective. But the thing about the roles is that each of those offers a vital perspective that is critical to the team's success. And so there are a couple of phenomena that happen. One is the herding effect. And the herding effect is basically whoever goes first has an undue influence on everybody else that follows. It's sometimes you see this on Wall Street all the time. A stock goes up and everybody goes, oh my gosh, that's the thing. Wikipedia did a study where they analyzed, they were deleting pages where they had to make decisions on tens of thousands of pages. Do we keep it or delete it? Because, the website gets so big, they have to kill some pages that aren't fully formed. And so they did this decision, this experiment. And what they found was that when they put a page up and said, should we keep it or delete it? If the first vote was to keep it, the likelihood that that page would be kept went up by 40%.
Wow, 40%. That's incredible.
If the first vote was to delete it, the ultimate decision to delete went up by 20%. So basically, it wasn't that the first person who speaks 100% controls the debate, but they have a huge amount of influence on it. And what happens is, you think of a typical meeting, usually the loudest, most extroverted voice, they're the ones that speak up. But how many brilliant introverts are sitting out there with that idea that might save the company? And so when a leader just kind of opens up the floor and says, all right, I'm interested in who's got an idea they want to share. Well, you get your dominant voices, the loudest ones. That implies that creates the herding effect. And then your quietest voices tend not to say much of anything. So one thing a leader has to do is make sure that you are surfacing voices, the roles that are going to be most valuable to whatever you're talking about. If you're talking about a change in culture, for example, you probably got to hear from your harmonizer. If you're talking about a project that has fallen behind schedule, you probably got to hear from your stabilizer. If you're talking about your company is going to start experimenting with AI, well, you probably should hear from your trailblazer. So you have to surface the voices that you need the perspectives from. But the second thing is you literally have to make them go first and actually say, Bob, you've been doing a lot in that trailblazer role. Why don't you lead us off? Tell us what you're thinking about this. Or Frank, you've been really killing it in that harmonizer role. Tell us what you think about this. Sally, you've been in that stabilizer role. You share with us what you're thinking. Jane, you're in the director role. Tell us what's going through your head right now. Whatever the perspective is that we need to hear from, that's the one that we really need to prioritize. And what it ultimately requires is a leader being much more intentional about selecting and picking people to hear from. The other aspect of this is we see this emerge a lot with groupthink. And, it's the same kind of herding effect occurs with groupthink, where people will be like, this idea is too crazy, and, brainstorming. And even though people say there's no bad idea, the truth is that, you get enough eye rolls and those noises, and pretty soon people go, oh, okay, I guess they don't really want my perspective on this. And one of the things that has been discovered is that, and there was a wonderful study done with some Wharton and INSEAD researchers, and what they found was that 10 minutes of thinking independently before a brainstorming session, what you do is you ask people, we're going to do a brainstorming session about XYZ topic. But before we do that, I want everybody, before you come to the meeting, sit alone by yourself for 10 minutes and just think through this issue, and then write down all of your thoughts. Write down all of your thoughts clearly enough that we could share it and pass it around to the rest of the group. And what that does is it forces people to ante up and share, actually put down all of those crazy divergent perspectives that are in their brain, bring them into the meeting, and now they can't self-censor because they already wrote it down. And this way, you as the leader have the opportunity to surface all of these divergent perspectives.
Now, when that happens, do you have people label what their ideas are, or is it done anonymously so people can, have their own bias towards one person's opinion versus another?
It totally depends on the group. And so when you are afraid that there is going to be some bias, that if I know this comes from Bob, then you do it anonymously, and you can do it through, just set up a free Survey Monkey and do it that way. Or, obviously it's going to, if you have them send it to you ahead of time, you as being the leader of the team, then you get to do with it as you will, and you get to control the conversation and the flow of the conversation. It's one of the most important things a leader can do is simply choose the order of who speaks and what they're talking about, and how long, because you get to surface whatever ideas are sitting out there that other people might be afraid to share.
Yeah, that's super valuable. And as somebody who's written 3 books on meeting science and how to get the most out of them, this definitely speaks to, the philosophy that I have, but also just proactively facilitating these discussions and ensuring that you don't just do the whole, what do you think, everybody? Because you're right. It's going to be the loudest voices, the most extroverted, and it's going to dominate the conversation. And others who have really valuable opinions will not be heard. That's why I also always suggest, if you are doing a virtual meeting, for example, and you want to pull out the voices of all those different roles, validate all different forms of participation. So sometimes people are much more comfortable putting information in chat, as opposed to raising their hand or coming off mute and speaking up, because you need to have all of those opinions put out there so that you can make the best decision possible. So, I think that this is really critical. It's interesting. You said if you could rewrite, the typical team meeting playbook, you would change who speaks when. And I guess this is what you're talking about, making sure that you have the voice in the room that is the most valuable, the most, steeped in what is being discussed, have the floor first. I also would push, if it's a hybrid meeting, if that voice is remote, make sure you push it towards the remotes first, because there is that in-room dominance.
And that's it's funny. We have organizations that will, even when they're, hybrid, and even when you have some people that are actually, in office, co-located, is from time to time, and I encourage everybody to try this, even if you have some people in the office, make everybody sit in their own office and do it as a fully remote meeting, because there is really no substitute for appreciating what the hybrid folks are going through then from time to time to just absolutely level the playing field.
Yeah.
And let's all go virtual. Let's all go on a Zoom. And I know it sounds stupid that we're all going to sit in our offices next to each other, literally next to each other, and all call into a Zoom. But what's the point of the meeting? Is it to have a little bonding with the in-person people? Because we could certainly do that with a cup of coffee after the meeting. Or is it to make sure that we get the best ideas and the best thinking from the people that are in this room? Which is a litmus test, by the way. If there is somebody and you're looking at them and they're like, there is no perspective that they offer, there is no special power that they offer, why are they in this meeting?
Yes.
And there is this,
no spectators in the meeting, Mark.
Exactly. I love that. Yes. And, people have this idea that, I have to include them. Do you? Because the vast majority of not professional meeting attenders, they will be hurt when they're not invited to the meeting. But for people that do real stuff, the vast majority of them are like, oh, I don't have to go to that meeting. Oh, thank you.
That's actually great. I love the idea of the professional meeting attender. I might steal that from you, but that's great. But I'm sure that there are leaders out there, managers who are thinking, wait, do I have all of those roles on my team right now? And how do I figure out if one is missing? Do you have any advice on that?
The simplest way is simply to ask. And the question you want to ask people is, what role do you think others would say that you play on this team? Now, the reason why I word the question like that is there's a phenomenon known as meta-perception. And basically what it is that if you ask somebody, what role do you play on the team? They are less accurate in assessing themselves than they are if you ask them, what would others say is the role you most typically play on this team? Weirdly, people are better judges of what others think about them than they are judging themselves. And this is that whole, not everybody has the 10 out of 10 in self-awareness. But if you ask them to put their, walk in another person's shoes and kind of see through their eyes, they get weirdly, almost twice as accurate. So, what I suggest is that you literally ask every single person on the team 2 questions. Number 1, what role would others on this group say that you'd most typically play on our team? That's 1. And then secondly is, after you've answered that, is there another role that you'd like to try out? Is there another role you'd like to do more of? And that does a couple of things for you. Number 1, that first question gives you an instant kind of read of your team, right? I literally encourage people to either pull out a laptop or a flip chart and literally list all 5 roles: director, harmonizer, achiever, stabilizer, trailblazer, and go, okay, Bob, Mary, Frank, Sue, Paul, Jane, whatever. And that will give you a quick little map of who do I have and what roles do we have or not have on this group. But then the second question, is there a role that you'd really like to develop or play more of? That will give you a sense as to what kind of bench strength you have. So if it turns out that you're missing a stabilizer, but you've got somebody on the team that's like, I know I don't really fulfill this function, I don't play this role on our team, but I would really like to do that. Well, awesome. Great. Either we just filled that role, or probably that, plus we've got a great development opportunity. If somebody already has the talent for that, awesome. But if they don't, but they're like, I want to grow into that and develop that, well, now you have a pretty good read as to what people on your team would like to develop moving forward, how they would like to grow. And that's a great thing to know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. When you hear their aspiration, that it inspires you to, lead them towards that. I think that's fantastic. I could talk to you for a really long time about this because the book is really fascinating. And I encourage leaders to pick it up because it can give you some great insight into what is working on your team, perhaps what is missing on your team, and perhaps you can do some self-reflection on the role that you play. But Before I let you go, Mark, I always ask this question of all my guests. What is one big takeaway that our listeners, our viewers can chew on until the next episode?
I'm going to do it. I'll give you two, but they're tied together. Number one is don't try and play all 5 roles on the team. There are so many leaders that feel like, well, I'm the leader. I'm the boss. I have to do all 5 roles. No, you do not. Number one, you are not equally good at all 5 roles. I don't care who you are. You are not equally good at all 5 roles. So don't try. Number two is when you do all 5 roles, the other people in the room stay silent and they don't get to grow and they don't get to participate. And it's those missing perspectives that when you miss those perspectives as the leader, you're the one that gets in trouble. It's not them. It's you. And so just for career protection purposes, don't play all 5 roles. And secondly, be brutally honest with yourself about what is the role you are best at and lean into that one and then go out of your way, much like I did and Karin did, that we want, okay, if I know that I'm not a great stabilizer and I know the single biggest hole I've got on my team is the stabilizer, well, that's the person number one, I got to go find that because that's the perspective that is going to save me. And then once I do that, I can go, well, okay, I'm not the world's best harmonizer, so I probably need one of those. And I'm not the world's best whatever, and on until you're, again, starting with some brutal honesty. Yeah, this is what I am and this is what I need. It will make you such a more complete leader. And side note, everybody on the team will be much happier because they get to contribute. They get to play a vital piece of the team because now you're allowing them to use their superpowers and really make a meaningful, important contribution to the group.
Mark Murphy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us in the form of the book as well as here on the podcast. All the best of luck with it. I think it's going to be a huge success based upon your track record as a New York Times bestselling author. I'm sure it will be.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Prior to my conversation with Mark, I went on his website and I took a quiz to find out what role I play on my team. I love quizzes, and I think you perhaps might as well. So if you would like to know what role you play on your team, that is part of this week's bonus content. So if you go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, it'll take you to a quiz where you can find out which of the 5 critical roles you play on your team, the good things that are associated with that, and also the things that you might have to mitigate. So go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content to take that quiz. I want to thank all of you for listening to this episode. If you found it to be valuable, please pass it along to family, to friends, to colleagues so that we can continue to build our community around Speaker Dynamics. Own the room. Until next time, everybody.